different groups, all different denominations. You know, the last bomber in London prior to the 7th of July was a man called David Copeland. He was a member of the British National Party, white supremacist.
Yes.
He bombed Brixton, Soho and Brick Lane. He killed 3, he maimed and injured over 80. He doesn't reflect or represent white or Christian opinion.
But I mean, in the news coverage of what he did they mention his religion at all?
Not at all, not at all. But I think you ask a good question, but he didn't carry out those acts in the name of his religion. So we've got to have a mature discussion about this.
Right.
These guys allegedly carried out their acts in the name of their religion. Now that isn't our religion. You see, foreign policy...
But this is, I'm sorry, it's just a question.
Sure.
Because, you know, we used to find that the BBC was very thorough in their reporting. And appears to the people outside that they've become a bit lax. And anybody who comes forward saying he represents Islam, they put the seal of authority on him and say he represents Islam.
This is the biggest problem we have in the media. I mean, alhamdulillah, it's not as bad as the problem in the US of A. I mean, I've watched CNN and Fox, and in disbelief, I've just come back from Palestine when the Lebanon crisis had started.
Now, what is your impression of the coverage you've seen from the US media?
Oh, it's frightening. It's the most biased media I've ever come across in my entire life. It is frightening. I mean, I couldn't believe during the Lebanon crisis that instead of filming the hundreds of deaths that were going on in Lebanon, all I saw was this field burning near Haifa. Nobody had died. But instead of focusing on the real carnage, and then, it was, I mean, I don't want to go into it in detail, but it was very disturbing stuff. I'd heard Fox News were very biased, but I didn't think CNN were as biased as I saw. And it was the poorest form of journalism I've ever come across. In the UK, the BBC in comparison is like a Rolls-Royce model. And these people, I mean, just cannot believe that they get away with it. And that's why I don't blame the average American person for the views that they have. Because they say you are what you eat. And if you're fed CNN and Fox, then you're going to believe a view of the world which isn't a real view.
Right. Okay, Shahid Malik, MP from the UK, what do you think that the British Muslims can do to elect more people like yourself to the parliament to help and bring to the forefront Muslim issues?
I think British Muslims need to integrate much more in society as general. We've got a lot to contribute.
Okay, can we back up? You say integrate more. What is the situation now for people who may not know?
The problem is that there's a lot of segregation.
Yes.
Geographical segregation. I'm not saying people have to live next door to each other, but I say people have to mix. You have to socialise, because if you don't, if you live in isolation, if you live parallel lives, then people will exploit that, because that creates misunderstanding, it creates anxiety, it creates apprehension and fear. But if you mix with each other, those anxieties and
But
fears
even the
go
Muslim
away.
who considers himself to be a very serious Muslim, at least he could look at this mixing as a form of dawah and letting the people know who you are. So when you go back to your place, it doesn't seem like such a strange environment.
I mean, I say this not with any sense of happiness or glee, because it depresses me, but the Muslims, alhamdulillah, in the US of A, I find much more progressive, much more enlightened, much more mature in their approach than the Muslims that I have in the UK.
Right.
That's not to generalise and stereotype everybody, but you know, if we're speaking in terms of generalisms, I think in the US, I think Islam and Muslims are perhaps much more mature in their outlook. Sadly, you have no political power in the US.
Right.
You're the best educated.
I talked to many of the guests here, especially about this issue of Muslims and voting. What advice could you give to the Muslims in America about becoming involved in the political process here? Because it's not like yesterday where you just voted for someone in your city, in your town, and it only affected your city and your town. The political attitude of America affects the entire world. The Muslims around the world are reaping the ramifications of the policies of our country. So what kind of advice would you give them?
I mean, I'd say to the Muslims, look at your cousins, the Jews in America, and they are doing phenomenally well. They have so much influence over policy that what should be foreign policy, i.e. the Middle East, is now domestic policy. It's not foreign. If it was foreign policy, it might be able, you might be able to deal with it, but it is domestic policy, which is quite a powerful statement. That they're showing how engagement in the media, how engagement